There we go. And we're right at I think we're at a point, Charles, where why don't you go ahead and kick us off, sir? Oh, it's 12:03. I'm in a time warp today. Everything is like way earlier than what I think.
I was talking to myself on mute, but welcome everyone to International Women's Day. I think this is a great thing that Dawn kicked off. I wanted to make sure that we got together and discussed some of the issues that women face, one in the workplace and maybe generally through your personal experiences in the world that could relate to the workplace. So I'm not going to get into that into too much detail, but we do as itSMF understand the importance of diversity of people and cultures within our organization, because as we know, as service management professionals, it allows us to get a broader view or broader perspective, which helps the business in the end create, I guess, what we would say, better value or increased value for their customers and their clients. So as you see that itSMF, just kind of getting into this, we're actually an IT service management interest group that allows service management professionals to get together and discuss and come together and collaborate on what some of the best approaches to handle some of the challenges that we might have. As you see, we're committed and dedicated to bringing groups together of people so that we can talk about the scenarios that we have, the issues we have, bring together the knowledge and the expertise that we have in order to help you as well as help others solve problems that deal with business. I think one of the most interesting things that Dawn and I mentioned over the last couple of weeks is that our environment has grown in such a way that it's no longer really relevant to almost call it IT. It's become digital because everything is digital within organizations. So the importance is just for you all to understand that this organization allows us to provide vendor agnostic solutions or concepts or theories which apply to service management and running your business more smoother and providing value to the customer. Don is listed here. We do actually have a couple of events scheduled in the near future. We have Troy DeMoulin, who's actually going to be presenting on Friday, and he will be delivering a wonderful presentation that we talked about. How big is your definition of us? So I think that's something that if you're interested in, you may want to dial in or tune in to this channel. He's from Pink Elephant, so it should be a really interesting discussion. Also in the future, we have Jim Dubois. He's actually a board member for a Fortune 500 company now. And he's also served as a CIO and other roles within Microsoft. I had the privilege to work with Jim. Jim is very interesting. He's come across some really interesting concepts that in my studies as of recent, I've actually come across some of the stuff that he's discussed. Lastly, David Cannon is a great resource as well. He's been around ITIL probably as long as ITIL has been out. And he was actually my first trainer for version 2. So, you know, that tells you how, I don't want to tell you about myself, but David is a great person to really discuss the futures of ITIL and service management. I would encourage that you all look for these to come up in the future and hopefully join. If not join the organization, at least join the call, but I would love to have you involved.
Great. And did you want to also, Charles, talk about the panel event that we're organizing probably for June? May or June?
Yeah. So Dawn and I, we were looking to host an event with Dave Poltoric. And Dave Poltoric is he's discussing a number of interesting topics. And one of the topics that he's really going to cover in discussion is how to communicate within your organizations. You probably noticed recently there's been some broadcast with regards to the critical communications capability framework, which he's established, that establishes how do we have some of those critical conversations. And what we're going to talk about during this panel is we're not going to look at it from, once again, an IT perspective. We're going to look at it from a business perspective, because right now, critical communications within your organizations, especially in this digital environment, it requires, I guess, focus that's top heavy and deep and broad. So we're looking at having a panel of experts that will range across the C-suite, along with David Poltoric to help us drive through that. And that will be held sometime in the June timeframe. I know that Dawn and I were framing it at this point. But,
so we'd welcome your input if you have great suggestions on panelists that really know how to communicate change impact, particularly as it relates to business CISO, you know, so anything the CISO suite or IT suite. How do we communicate through crisis and manage that effectively in a post-COVID era? Definitely be in touch with us. We would like, we're looking at a few excellent panelists and we'd like your recommendations as well.
So I guess this is going to be the closing. We have a couple of slides here, but the key here is just we're hoping that you all have an interest in service management, or if you don't have one, but you've always wanted to know what we do, to really reach out to us and connect and help us grow and develop with regards to our knowledge and our expertise that we can share with others. But I think the big push here is to really, you know, get engaged with your local league, local interest group, that is, and help us kind of charge forward. We have a number of roles available. Did you want to proceed to the next slide? So I don't want to get into why joining us, because I believe I've touched this, but the fees are fairly nominal, but what you get from it is you get the wealth of knowledge that we have within our environment or our microcosm. So I would suggest that you all take a look at what we do, take a look at where service management can provide value, or how itSMF could potentially provide value, and join and get involved. We have a number of roles available. I know that I'm the president today, and we have Dawn, who's our president and past president, by the way, of the San Francisco chapter. So we have her, but we're looking to grow. We need membership and people to help us. As you can go to the next slide, Dawn.
Sure, sir.
In Chicago. Yeah, we have the secretary and we have the membership chair and the event chair open. We're looking at filling those slots. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to us. We do have a wonderfully interesting, I guess, discount if you'd like to come in as a member officer and help. We would love to have your help. Right now, it's just a two-person show. So if you all would be interested, feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to Dawn. Dawn, it's your floor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we do invite everyone, regardless of where you're located, to certainly join our LinkedIn group and to participate in our chapter in our local interest group. While we're located in Chicago, we know, and you know, that service management is global. It's everywhere. And we want our programs to reflect that. So our goal in Chicago is to reflect and showcase the best of Chicagoland service management, but we also know that we serve the nation and the world. Let's come together, and please join us on those groups. And we would love to highlight if you have speaker topics or something in service management you'd like to explore, please be in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you and work with you. So today's topic is International Women's Day. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us on this topic. It's not going to be as much presentation as it's going to be discussion, but I want to give the foundation for those that are not familiar with International Women's Day and how we kind of got here in the first place. Wednesday, March 8th is International Women's Day. The topic for this year is really digital innovation and technology for gender equality. So the main thing that we're going to talk through today, and I'd like to do this sort of as a roundtable as we go through this. Please introduce yourself, where you're from, who is your most influential leader, what did you learn from them about leadership, and what actions do you think will most help us to embrace the topic for International Women's Day today, which is embrace equality. How can we improve gender parity? So I would like to go through and see who has things to share. And if people are being shy, I'll start picking on people. But I would love to hear you introduce yourself and where you're from, and a little bit on your take on embracing equality. Anyone want to start, or shall I start picking?
So you aren't going to go first on?
I said, nope, this is about you guys, you all. And yes, I will be participating, but I would love to hear you start us off, Mindy.
Yeah, so Mindy Crozier, I am in Atlanta. I am on the board of the Atlanta Local Interest Group. So put something in the chat that if you're in Georgia, not Chicago, and want to join us, we'd love to have you too.
Right.
We are starting to have, we're planning a first in-person event since COVID. So hopefully that'll go well. But let's see here. Who is my most influential woman leader? I honestly don't really have one, right? I mean, not, there hasn't been any mentorship woman that I have had that, has really coached and helped me, right? Being in IT, I mean, I did switch, I've been in itSM for a long, long time, but before that, Unix, Oracle, AS400, you name it, right? And it was, not many women. So, again, it was just, I grew up with very strong, parents, and it didn't really matter to me, men or women, right? But I really didn't have a lot of women in the area that I grew up in and stuff. But again, I just, I had a lot of men mentors and things like that that, helped me on my path. But there really wasn't any woman that was above or equal to me that I worked with. What did I learn about leadership? Again, I did go through a mentorship program at one of the companies I worked at. And again, I'm in IT, but I got assigned somebody in public affairs. And so that happened to have been a woman, but we spoke different languages, right? So what I did learn about that was learning to speak to other people, that again don't understand geek speak, right? So that was, that was a good lesson, right? For just how could I communicate to her some of the challenges and understand that part of the business as well. Because I think that's important to be a well-rounded leader, not just to stay in your silo, but to really understand what the company does and understand the importance of all the different parts. I think that's very important. What actions most help us to embrace equality? Don't know if I'm supposed to go through everything. Is that right, Dawn? Am I supposed to kind of, okay. So again, I think it's being mindful, right? About things that not to most of the time, like in a family, like, the women will be the one that takes the kids, or if the kid is sick, right, they're the one who goes and get them. Not everybody, right? But in a lot of families, that's the case. So if somebody has to cancel a meeting, just kind of understanding that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
And, I think it's important, for spouses to also step up. My husband does, right? If the kids have to go somewhere or do something, right, he's right there to say, well, let me check my calendar, see if I can do it, right? So, I think that that's really just important to do, but be considerate, right? I mean,
Right.
I have a T-shirt that says, "Be kind," because everybody's fighting their own invisible battle.
True.
So, male or female, right?
Right.
You don't know, there might be somebody that's a single parent, male or female. So just, try to understand, there is the work-life balance, right? And sometimes life and personal things come into work. I think that's really important to take care of. People are like, oh, you can be on a call at 7, 8 o'clock at night. No, I can't, right? Again, that's more, not really just about equality. But one thing about equality is if, you have people in your organization, whether they report to you or not, and you see somebody struggling, help them, right?
Right.
Again,
Absolutely.
male or female, it doesn't really matter. And how can we improve in gender parity? I think things like this, right? We have Women's Day. The kudos to you, Dawn, for setting up this discussion for everybody. Again, just a chance to talk and, you know, air things, right? And if everybody, you know, either participates or takes away one thing that they've learned or that they're going to do different, I call that a success.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, I'm going to raise my hand, I guess. I have a quick question, Mindy. So, have you observed any issues with regards to gender parity? Because I know that I've become pretty much, I was going to say blind to it if it does exist. The reason why is because I started early in my career working for a company called Anderson Consulting, and they had some really outstanding engineer and architects who were women, and they were really strong. And that's where I essentially, for the lack of using the right term, I was baptized in really, you know, understanding the value that women can bring, you know, the perspective, you know, and looking at it from a different perspective, even being able to do the same work, you know, because that's when we were doing server builds and building out and doing all types of really fun stuff. So do you see that clearly now? Because you know, essentially my thinking of, you know, there's two different genders in the workplace is pretty much almost gone, other than not having emotional intelligence from a male perspective sometimes. But do you see anything that's obvious that, you know, I should probably look at or consider, or we should in general just kind of look around and notice if it's there that could help?
Let me think about that.
Darn good question, Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanna
So how
know.
could you improve? Again, I mean, I just went through a job search for a long time, right? And I did find even today that there are a lot of people who, again, because I'm a woman, right? You know, women don't have a tendency to talk about their credentials, right? That's a fact, right? Uh, you know, I just talk about, you know, who I am and what I've done, right? But, you know, um, I found that if I would start a lot of conversations by being like, well, you know, I'm an ITIL 4 managing professional and a Six Sigma black belt, you know, it would make people go, whoa. But if I, you know, talked about other things first, especially to a male interviewer, it was kind of like, yeah, you know what I mean? It just, that was something I noticed. And even at the company that I did accept an offer for, I am one of the few women.
Yeah.
You know, I went out to lunch yesterday. My boss invited his Atlanta team out to lunch, and I was the only woman. Right. So again, but I think, like I said, you know, you know, and even if people don't have credentials, if they've had the experience, but again, you know, just making sure that that you kind of dig further, right, into, because women are not always going to brag as much as males might have a tendency to do. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to men, right? I know plenty of
It's a
men.
different style by which we
Exactly.
communicate.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know, again, there might be somebody that would be a fabulous fit for a job or a promotion or something, but they're singing praises of their team, not themselves, but they're the ones that are motivating the team to get the work done.
I
Understood.
think that one of the things that I'd like to explore is just that. When we talk about gender parity, we're really not talking about, it's about bringing our best self regardless of our gender. And I think some of the things, I was astounded when I saw the news this week about one of our UN leaders saying it's going to take us 300 years to achieve gender parity. Why? If women are at least 50% of the workforce, which we are, and if we are already occupying in those roles, we're accountable to the same level of work as our male counterparts, and yet we're paid 88 cents on the dollar on average compared to our male counterparts. That's inequity. Fortune 500, of the Fortune 500 companies, I saw Fortune saying, for the first time in history, women now represent 10% of the Fortune 500. Now, yes, it's great that we've made history in that way. And I am not one, I'm always in favor of hiring the best person for the job. However, I do feel that we as women need to find ways to articulate our value equal to that of our male counterparts, to make our position compelling and to make our offering compelling. If we represent 50% of the workforce, we're doing the equal job of our male counterparts, and we are over 50% of the spend in business. We need to be represented on boards to represent the market and the products that are offered as well. What do others feel about
that? If you don't mind that I jump in, I know we talked about
that? No, this is the discussion. I
yesterday.
want everyone to jump in.
And I'm gonna say this again. I think it's a matter of we have to change the old guard. You know, the old guard has to change, or the thinking of the old guard. Let's look at where we just came from, right? With regards to COVID. The old guard always said we needed to be in the office by 9.
Right.
9, yeah, at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock, and we couldn't leave until 5, and they wanted to see us at our desk, and you were graded based on performance, being at your desk or being in the office until late. But I believe the old guard is probably changing its perspective in that, to some degree, that we're understanding that remote work can occur. The same thing with regards to the value of what women, and I'm going to say diversity as a whole, brings to the table. It allows you
Correct.
to create more value within your organization. It allows you to have different perspectives, bring in more customers. As companies become more and more global, you're going to require these. So I think it's going to take, I don't think it's that 500 years that you mentioned. I think it's probably just a changing of a generation, because that generational thinking right now that we may have through either the baby boomers starting to move on you know, moving towards the millennials who are taking over. I think you're going to start to see more and more parity as you go, or more equality if you look at it from that perspective, because the mindset is going to change by default. You know, that controlling aspect is going to wane away over time, but we may not see it during this generation.
I want to jump in really, really quick and say, baby boomers are not leaving the market working. That is so untrue statement, and it's not reality. And I just want to say that, because I think you see 3 women on here, at least the 3 of us, we are all baby boomers and we're still working. And in some way or another, and to say that we're moving on to another, you know, it's not true. And I'll tell you,
Yeah, right, Terry.
did not us be able to move anywhere any faster, because especially now with so much of
Terry,
and can you hear me?
I can now.
Yeah,
We can now. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I walked into another room that has I have a mesh network going on in here, and sometimes it doesn't like it because we're having snow today, so apologies. So the pandemic didn't help. Now that the tech sector is being hit again with massive layoffs, trying to find something and you're not 40 is really tough, because that's probably, you know, and you go on LinkedIn and you see all these people go, oh, I just got a job. I just got a job. You don't see as much with people who are a little bit older. And it's so bizarre that, you know, the reason I did lose my job is because I was older. There is ageism still, and all the stuff that goes on. And so I will now get off my soapbox, but I just wanted to clarify, just because we're generation, and you know, the baby boomers, we're still working.
Yep.
So Terry, I'm going to actually target that point. That was a good point that's made. So with the baby boomers still being around, do you feel that that is a potential issue of having a generation that still carries perspective of, you know, maybe they've come up through the role? It's not that they intentionally do it, or the male baby boomers, or even prior to that, but it's something that you get through habit, or something that you get through association. I'm reading a book now that's entitled barbarians at the gate. And it was talking about RJ Reynolds and the downfall of RJ Reynolds, right? But they were talking about all of these networks and systems that are established generations through generations that essentially you have to see either, if it's the baby boomer and they're not going, I think it may say that still we have to wait it out until we see any real change. What's your perspective on that particular thought that we, even if the baby boomers stay, do you think that's the problem? Do you think it's something else?
We've been
What's that, Terry?
we've been waiting. So what are we still waiting for? A mind shift?
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking it's a mindset change. And, again, it took us so long to have a pandemic for us to start looking at remote work as an option, right? So now what's going to change? What's going to be the next thing that's going to drive change? Because it's got to be something. A tipping point may be generational change or,
I think
people
we, go ahead, Terry.
Their bill, more people unable to pay their bills because they have reached an age of maybe 50 and they are unemployed, and it's going to hit hard. And you talk about not being able to put enough money into, Social Security and Medicare and everything.
We'll be working until we die of stress.
Yeah, let's do that. But that kind of goes. We were working remote in 2004, 2005. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so Dawn and I were at the same company. We know it worked way back then.
Oh, yeah. So, and what we did differently, and Terry, I think you're right on about A, the challenges, and B, this working from home is not a new thing. It's just that COVID brought a different way of looking at the new thing. What we need to do is, yeah,
right. But there's a lot of companies that are now requiring employees to go back.
They
right.
are.
I mean, I took my job in January on the premise it was remote. My first week, they're like, "Oh yeah, in February you got to come back."
And the reality
I was like,
is, why?
Okay, but I mean, we also have to think it's a mind shift, right? I mean, because
It is.
to be honest, I mean, you said, the first question is who is my most influential women leader, and I said nobody, but there's Condoleezza Rice, right? Margaret Thatcher, Maggie Thatcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she led her country for years, right? And almost 20 years, right? But in America, if we get a woman who's running for president, it's like, even if it's a vice president, they make such a big deal about it, right? And again, so I think it's, there's a lot of countries in the world that have had women leaders for years, but
without an issue.
In America.
So, yeah. So I guess what I would like to see us doing, and I hold myself accountable, and I would offer the same to you. Terry, you and I, when we were working at Sun a bazillion years ago, was an amazing company, great culture, and some of my most influential women leaders came from that experience. At the time I worked in IT at Sun, women in leadership were probably more than other companies, but not as much as it should have been. I was a speaker for the Help Desk Institute Japan delegation of service management. The first 3 years that I spoke, there were no women in the group, and they asked me to use an interpreter because women just didn't speak. And I said, no, if you want me to speak, I will be speaking, but I will not have a man speak for me. And on the third year I was speaking for them, there were 5 women coming from Japan on that delegation. Women started to be represented in the IT sector in Japan, where it was a man's world. I think we need to represent our places already at the table. How can we help elevate one another? When you are looking for work, how can I help you? At Sun, we did that. I organized a group, and it's still in practice today on LinkedIn. It's called Jobs and Career Success Network. We have helped thousands of people worldwide find their next jobs just by, when you have a job and need one, share it. Need talent, share it. When you need a job, share that. If we come together where supply meets demand, we create opportunities for one another. The same with the Executive Women's Network. on that network, we talk about what can we do to elevate the opportunity. It's not about just promoting women above all others. It's about promoting diversity, and that diversity creates opportunity. If we understand that, we're really at the heart of business, and I think we can make a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'd have to say what my first person that really hit me whenever you said who helped influence me, that was Lori Tolson, who was leading, IT, the development of our software. And
Yes.
she's a dear friend. And I have, that was like, she worked with Phyllis all in the same group. And I supported them with communications and, and
Phyllis was
and
amazing too. Phyllis was somebody that Phyllis Scargo had taught many of us how to create compelling events just by bringing people together to talk. And that's power. And that's really where opportunity lies.
I agree.
What about others on the call? And before we leave to others, Terry, did you find your right opportunity?
No, not yet.
Let's talk. Let's talk, because I don't know if you guys knew this, but one of the other things I do when I worked at Sun, we were at a tough time right after September 11th. Those were unsettling times. And when the World Trade Center was bombed, 1 month after that, we had to lay off 20% of our workforce. Well, when you're in IT and you're head of PMO, projects gets cut first. So my task was to lay off 50% of my own staff. This is how I started helping people find jobs. This is how the Jobs and Career Network began. But the thing that we did is we just kept doing that. Today, I have a 70,000 member recruiters network as a result of what we did in that crisis. I have a 20,000 member Jobs and Career Network, where the stuff that we're doing is helping many people to find jobs. It's just if we connect differently. We get so busy with our day work and trying to survive, we don't network when we're working because we're too busy, and we panic when we're laid off, so that it's a whole like guilt set that comes in. Let's stay connected and healthy and whole. It happens in best practices. Charles and I talk about this often too. What can we do to keep our skills sharp, our mind sharp, and our optimism high enough to create so much opportunity that we can't be turned away? So Terry,
Amen.
I got your
Amen.
back on that. What about others? Joanne, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting conversation.
Mhm.
My experience is, I don't think I've ever had an influential woman leader. I've been in IT since my 20s. I'm now 50.
Mhm.
I think I've had a community of women that really have been on both sides of the spectrum. Right?
Yeah.
There's always women that are competing, but there's
Yeah.
always women that are supporting and engaged. So that's the community that I tend to lean towards.
That's smart.
But I think that's what I've learned about leadership is that listen, regardless of who is speaking and who is presenting, is really, we need to not only listen, but ensure we're hearing people. And it's, those basics active listening,
Yeah, right.
body language, etc. But as I get older, turning 50, it's more patience for me and finding the joy. And what I said the other day, I've been in service management for about 20 years, and I work as the business owner for ServiceNow, but as a ITSM, I'll say service management individual. I see myself more as that solution architect between process
You
and
have to
tool.
be at service now, I'm sure.
But it's 3 + 6 = 9. That's sort of 7 + 2. So I've learned to listen. I want to be more engaged, but sometimes I know the answer, but I have to guide others, right? It's not about me. On the other spectrum, we always get, I've accepted there's always going to be women that will challenge you. There's always going to be women competing. And I'm like, I'm not interested in being CIO. I'm interested in competing.
I like what you're sharing about that, because I guess there's a piece in knowing what makes you happy. And to me, survival of the fittest is highly overrated.
I agree with that. I have confidence in my skills. I've worked really hard. Because it's almost, I'm Gen X, right?
Mhm.
I went into, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to get a career, you got to establish yourself. And I went from public to private. So I work for a university now, and I have for the last decade. And it's a challenge, but for me, it's understanding my environment, understanding who's there, the generation behind us. I've learned a lot from in terms of equity,
Right.
moving us forward, thinking differently. But also I'm challenged by the generations above us, right? Because it's very old school. You must chair and seat, or seat and chair, right?
Mhm.
And I accomplish more online than I do anywhere else.
I agree. I became our most effective employee, and Terry and I work from home when working from home just plain wasn't done all that much. And I love the work that I do. I love the people that I work with and the diversity of their skill set. But, we've been doing this a while. If we can focus our efforts on the best outcomes, not having this disruption allows us to be most productive.
I agree. It's how do we embrace equality? That's the challenge. For me, it's supporting younger generations that are looking to do more STEM type work. I wasn't encouraged to do that, right? It was get a job.
Yeah.
I've had a job since I was 16.
You
Or
and me
actually
both.
even, right? It's not about that. It's having, it's oftentimes I'm the only girl or woman in a room.
Mhm.
And as an introvert and who likes to just listen and watch, it's often challenging to have your voice and have the respect of your voice with a lot of men. Sometimes there is a locker room mentality depending on the age or depending on the character. And I'm learning to understand that that's not a generational thing. It's more of an environment thing. It's how these people have grown up. It's part of their cultures, or it's, your experience in other organizations. And there's wonderful men that I work with and who I collaborate with. And I think respect just goes to respect. It's like you put happiness out there, happiness will come find you. So I try to think that way, but we need more women, and the action is just mentoring and supporting for me.
And we need more thinkers like you. The thing is, your ability to, when people don't ask, you're able to observe more as a result of your observation of others and true deep listening of others. You have a lot more to offer if people remember to ask and you remember to step out and offer, because you observe more than most would. And that's a beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting stuff, Joanne. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What about you, Dan? You've been very quiet too.
Hi, everybody. I've been in the IT field for 36 years now, and in about 10 different companies during that time. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to have a very diverse set of leaders through my career. And I would say if I look back at my direct supervisors and leaders, probably about 75% of them were women. So I think it's just the nature of where I was working at the time had a good, I'll say, diverse in the sense that that I worked directly in areas that had a good women representation, both that were my coworkers, my directors, my VPs, and my CIOs. So, when I think of, the ones that were the most influential to me, those ones that were kind of in my chain of command above me, what did I learn about leadership from them? I think, what I learned, I think mostly from those experiences was that stands out to me as the ability to observe somebody that truly listens to the people that surrounded them and, take everything into consideration and, make good decisions, from all that input, irregardless of male or female. And I think that's what kind of inspired me, is seeing that and I'll use a term that was thrown out earlier, less of the good old boy or the locker room mentality, that to me kind of showed that, you need to, utilize everybody's thoughts in the room, whether they're good thoughts or bad thoughts or what have you.
And at the end, there really aren't bad thoughts. I mean, they're just thoughts, and considering them as well worth the exploration. That's good stuff, Dan.
Yeah. And when I'm looking at the chart here, what actions need to help us to embrace equity, I think it's just awareness. It's an ongoing challenge, and I think people need to constantly be aware of it, which I think, now that we, the topic of this conversation, International Women's Day, I mean, I think it's a topic that needs to stay out there and be out there, and, until it's, truly absorbed into our culture. And, so I certainly, where I've had the opportunity to be a part of diversity teams and councils within the companies I've had, I think, I've tried to help be a part of that and be a spokesperson for that throughout my career. And,
Nice.
I worked recently, spent about 6 years with Deloitte, and, very happy with my experience there with the diversity, both beyond just male and female. I got to work with people from a multitude of different companies and internationally. And, so it's great to see diversity at work. And, again, on the topic of women, during my stint there, there was a change of the guard from the men to the women at the top ranks of Deloitte.
Deloitte is one of the companies that took that a little more seriously than others too, and that's nice.
Yeah, and I think, so again, I think it's just by the nature of where I've worked that there's been good, I can't say the numbers probably supported, but at least in the areas of directly where I worked, there was always good representation. And, how can we improve that? Again, I think it's still just, keeping the awareness and the facts out there. I think I heard somebody mention earlier that, even though there's been great strides, it's maybe still 10% or something.
Yeah,
of the
10% is not much of the Fortune 500, right?
So to me, that's what people need to know. And I've seen it in my time where there's been great attempts to bring women into the higher leadership roles, but then it seems like there's always maybe 2 steps forward and 1 step back, so
I've seen
easy
similar. Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to fall back. And, that's where I think the topic just needs to still be out there and not just disappear into the woodwork.
I like that. Very good stuff, Dan. Thank you. And I will share from my perspective, because I really didn't introduce myself all that much, the dialogue I think was so important for us today. So I'm Dawn Simmons, and I am Dawn Simmons Khan, the vice president here for Chicago itSMF. The reason Charles and I kind of bonded together so much is our passion for best practices. It's not about gender, it's not about age, it's not about anything other than, wow, what else could we do if we shared ideas, innovations, and lifted one another up? And that's what best practices do. I've been so fortunate in my career, in my life. I love what I do in IT. I love service management. It's not really IT service management, service management. Most influential leaders in my life, not just men and women. One of my most influential women leaders was Assemblywoman Barbara Matthews from California. What I learned that she did she started as a small town politician, and she got involved in politics, not because she loved it, but because she envisioned a better world. And she spoke out against small town politics so boldly, so simply, and she influenced change with her actions. I've never seen anybody do that before. And to see her not get emotionally attached when she was arguing for something, she kept such a solid logic around something. She influenced change in the workforce and in the community in ways I hadn't seen in others. My second influential leader was at Sun Microsystems. The best manager I've ever worked for in my lifetime was Rob Gielen. My manager was from the Netherlands, and there weren't many women in IT at the time when I was, when he came into our team, we were all working ourselves to death. And when he came into the team, he refused to listen to anybody's politics. He said, I won't talk about any personalities until I've observed for a month. So he came in and observed our team for a month. And he said nothing. Day 30, nothing. He wouldn't allow any backbiting. He wouldn't allow any side talk. I'm still observing. And on day 31, he shared with the most beautiful logic, his macro vision and his micro vision of where we were going as an organization to turn around support where it was at its lowest at Sun Microsystems at the time. He shared how we were going to do this. And the best thing a great leader does is asks you to do a little bit more than you think you're capable of. And that's what he did for me. We had really good conversations he says, Dawn, I don't know if you're ready if you're tough enough to be an IT manager. Well, I took that kind of the wrong way. It took me a while to learn how to be authentic as a woman, who I am as a woman, and not have to be the aggressive of the men that were trying to kind of stop me from doing what it was I was doing. It took me a while to find that authenticity, and he allowed me to make the mistakes. Somebody that will allow you to make the mistakes, but will guide you to make better decisions with you, that's a partner, and that's an influential leader. I learned more from him than anyone. The other biggest influence of my life is a very brief interaction I had when I met, I don't know if you guys know, of the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Dr. Muhammad Yunus. But he taught me the one thing that we can do to really make a difference is bring our best selves. And he said, every challenge has an economic opportunity within it for turning things around. And he had solved night blindness in Asia. And it's the craziest way that he solved it. The problem in Asia is that many women could not see in the nighttime. Now, the reason for that is malnutrition. You could say simply eat more carrots and you'll be able to see. But human nature would not allow you to just eat more carrots, because if you're already not able to afford to eat well, you want to enable your family to eat, you're going to allow that to happen. You're not going to take care of yourself. So what he did instead is he was empowering women to become business owners. And in addition to that, he would say, oh, and by the way, I have this pack of seeds, 33 cents. You can buy that if you'd like. Learn how to grow those seeds for your family, yourself, and sell the surplus back to the community. 33-cent pack of seeds reversed night blindness in Asia. And the way it did that is he didn't tell people, eat this and take care of yourself and you'll be able to see. He said, learn how to grow these seeds. They did. They started consuming those 33-cent package of carrot seeds. Night blindness was reversed for them and everybody around them because they were now selling the surplus to the community. Everyone was getting better. And then more people were getting into business as well. It's a crazy idea. Simple. Everybody thought it was too big because they were looking at the macro problems. Everybody's poor. Nobody could deal with all of these issues. 33-cent pack of seeds. What could we do to improve gender parity? By just treating ourselves with and one another with that level of uplifting. What can we do together? What can we do more? That's what I'm fascinated by. How could we improve gender parity? I think every year I think about this. Why? I work really hard and I get paid 88 cents on a dollar for my male counterparts. Does that mean I'm worthless? Or does that mean we just haven't found the way to articulate our value equitably? What could we do to change that? Now, I'm not complaining about the way I'm paid. I'm paid very well. But I want for all women to be paid very well, for all people to be paid very well, because when families can support one another, we all do better. When our community is working, everyone does better. So what can we do to help one another in business and in life? Connected caring. And that's why I'm excited about what we're doing Friday, because Friday, do you guys know about Troy Dumoulin? How many of you have heard of Troy Dumoulin from Pink Elephant?
No, I haven't heard.
Okay, I'll tell you a bit about him. Troy is.
I've heard of him.
He is one of my favorite leaders. When I worked at Sun, Troy, I learned so much from him about service management because he had an amazing blog that I used to read and learn from. And I learned how to do a lot of my job and elevate it from Troy. I would blog on something that I learned from him. He'd blog back. Well, Troy was way smarter than I am. And he is one of the top 25 leaders of service management in the world. So he is a keynote speaker. He goes and influences change by what he's done. A lot like you, Joanne, when you observe things and then you put it into practice and it changes people. That's what Troy does. So what he's talking on Friday is kind of taking what we're talking about today and kicking it up a notch. He talks about how big is your vision for us. It's about customer experience, how we incorporate customer experience, employee experience. It's really about how do we care about one another. So I'm really excited what he has to share because I've always learned about him from service management. But post-COVID, I think we have new challenges to deal with on how it's not improving gender parity. It's improving the way we communicate and support one another where we are.
Hey, Dawn,
Yes.
in the chat, I put a link to it's not a test. It's my mind just went completely blank. Anyway, it will help you understand what type of listener you are.
Nice.
It is about, it'll take you anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to finish this. It's free, it doesn't cost anything, but it will help you kind of understand what type. Are you an immersive listener? Do you sit and listen and take the listen to it and then provide feedback? Are you one that just jumps in to a conversation? And it kind of, a lot of people don't really know what type of listening they do.
Well, that's cool. I love that type of stuff. Thank you.
Yes,
Carrie.
and so here at Nancy Duarte, who I absolutely,
she's amazing. I don't know.
she's amazing. Anyway, this was something that she provided in a webinar that she had for a group of us, and so I thought, and it's free to share. Please share with anybody and everybody you know to help
Nice.
people understand what type of listening they do, because it can be changed. You can change if you find that it's not working well for you. So anyway.
Oh, and she's amazing. She used to teach some stuff. I've attended some of her seminars. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So as we start to wrap up, what are your do you guys have any other thoughts about what we could do to influence change better? I like the idea of sharing about the learning skills and advancing that. What other, any closing thoughts about what we could do differently with one another?
I think we still need to be kind. People are still very raw.
Yeah.
I remember in the end of March 2020, I had been sick with COVID, and there was a group of us on a phone call. Of course, we didn't know it was COVID at the time because you couldn't get tested, right?
Right.
And there's about 20 of us on there. We were doing a bunch of planning, and people were at each other's throats.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, guys, this is not us. This is not who we are. We have to be kind. I said, none of us know what the other person's going through. And
Right.
there was about 20 of us on the call, and we were all crying by the time we had an opportunity just to say, it's okay. It's okay to be scared and unsure and, frightened or knowing where you're going, but let's continue to be kind, because that goes a long way. And I think that's something we have to continue to carry forward every single day.
I think 911 hurt a lot. COVID hurt a lot more because it affected us worldwide. We didn't know where it was going to take us. Like you, Terry, few on the call know this, but not everybody. I'm a long COVID patient. I've been in a fight for my life since June 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be kind to one another, because sometimes we compare our outsides to another's insides. I think there's so much we can do by that kindness, really caring about one another to a point where we can uplift one another. People are still reeling from the effects, not just of COVID, but the economic effects of, the layoffs that have continued, have people that are critically ill struggling for how am I going to recover when I lost health insurance, income. We need to really care for each other in a different way. So I think now that we're on the top of the hour, and I know we have other meetings to get to, if you guys would like to receive this recording, and I've got resources here, these are all links. I don't know if I could put that in chat or not, but what we can do in that is I provide resources for people who are looking for jobs, for the Women's Network, stuff like that. If you guys have other resources, please put that in chat, and I'll get that out to the attendees on today's call so that you'll have resources and we continue the dialogue going forward.
And you're also going to post this, right, at itSMF?
Yes, I am.
Good, because I already posted something on LinkedIn that it would be there.
Yes. So please help us get the word out about Troy on Friday. It's going to be the same time. How big is your definition of us? And it really is about the caring stuff that you've talked about, Terry. I really want to thank you guys for attending. I feel so uplifted from your sharing today, and so encouraged that I think together we can make a huge difference for many more. What can we do with that? I'm just excited about that, and I hope you are too.
Me too. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
So before we go, Dan,
Yes, sir.
I noticed that you asked, will this qualify for CPE? I'll have to check with Russ. Russ was on the call. I'm not sure if this does or not, but I will check, and we can get back to you and let you know. If you could leave your email address in the chat, that would be great, and we can get back to you. And then following also, thank you, Terry. Thank you. Thank you, Mindy, for your input, and thank you, definitely, Dawn, for pulling this together. It's been a great discussion.
Loved it.
Thanks for doing this. It was really great to connect.
Awesome. Let's keep in touch. Thank you, guys. I'll be in touch.
Thanks,
I've got
guys.
another meeting now too.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Charles. You're awesome. And Dan, thanks for dialing in. Loved what you had to share.